number 2 of the show here on your Thursday. Good to have you with us. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. I'm excited about my next guest as there's about a million ways we could talk today because there's a lot of things that she is doing, and she is doing quite well. Naomi Kritzer is kind enough to join us. She is a well-known author. She in science fiction and fantasy, living in Saint Paul. Been writing science fiction and fantasy for 20 years. The short story Cat Pictures, Please won the 2016 Hugo and Locus Awards, as one nominated for a Nebula Award. She's also catfishing on Catnet, came out November 19th, 2012. Basically, she's also been actively publishing. Her latest book is Liberty's Daughter, that came out last year. So a well-recognized, well-noticed, honored writer, which I could talk to Naomi about that for a long time. But she is magnificent because she will tell stories for food. The blog, which goes and in-depth talks about a lot of the lower races that are going to be on your ballot. You know what? I was talking about this earlier. You fill out your ballot, president, senator, blah, 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 and then you flip it over, and then there's a whole bunch of judges. There might be some county seats you don't know about. A lot of people don't know anything about those races, but the reality is you should absolutely know who's running in those races because those races matter, and Naomi is doing a fantastic job of keeping us up to date on that, and she's kind enough to join us to talk about both of these issues. Hello, and thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. Now, so let's start with the blog. What prompted you? I mean, here you are, you're a writer, you've been a successful writer, you've been quite a books published. What all of a sudden triggered you to say, you know what, there is no one really talking about these lesser races, and somebody needs to do the information on this?
So the way I got started doing this was 20 years ago. I was researching my own ballot, and I realized that you could get a sample ballot. I don't remember if at that point it was via the Secretary of State's website or some other place. But I had a copy of my sample ballot, and I was like, okay, I can actually look up some of these people and figure out who I want to vote for. At the time, in addition to the stuff that's currently on the ballot, we had library board on the ballot in Minneapolis, which is where I was living. And we had to vote for soil and water commissioners. They were on the ballot at the time. And so I started Googling and taking notes. And I figured I needed to take notes, so I would just take them in the text entry window of my LiveJournal. And then when I was done, I went ahead and turned that into a LiveJournal post. I had a couple of local friends, and I figured I did all this research, so I can put that on I can put that online, and maybe it'll be useful to some of my friends. And then I think I did that the next year as well. And then the year after that, I didn't. And I had friends email me, and they were like, "Why didn't you write about the park board, whatever it was we were voting on?" I didn't know who to vote for. So it very quickly became something where I had readers who were telling me that they found it useful. And so I kept doing it. And initially I only did my own ballot, but over time I started researching more of the city, which at the time I lived in Minneapolis, and I moved to Saint Paul and I expanded to Saint Paul. I only do races that appear on the ballots in Minneapolis and Saint Paul, though, because once there's so much local knowledge that I rely on, and it's already so much work that I don't try to, I once looked at some council races in Richfield, so it's just over the line, and I looked at the websites and I was like, I don't know what these people are talking about. These are talking about important local issues that I am not plugged into because I don't live there. Yeah. But that's how I got started.
Well, and one of the truth, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing because I've tried to do this. We used to have, and this will be a shot on the newspapers. I remember when the newspapers back in the 80s would print out a special edition with all these races in there, and they talk about the judge, and at least you'd have some basic information. I've done online searches, and there's some of these candidates, you can't find a dang thing about them. We had a school board race in Hopkins where it looked like a land developer was running 3 candidates to basically just try to peel off part of the Hopkins school district and put it in the Edina school district. And just trying to find anything about those candidates was brutal. You're doing this race after race after race. That has got to be, there is an amount of time and effort that is in here, I can see, because I've tried to do this, which is outstanding. And I can't tell you what a treasure it is. And I can't encourage enough people to go to We'll Tell Stories for Food, because it is really, you're not going to find this information anywhere else.
Yeah, I started looking for it and sharing it because I wasn't finding it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of where I got started, was like not being able to find anything where this was put together. Mm-hmm. So, and yeah, it's a lot of work.
Oh, it is. Well, I want to get, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a little bit from one of your posts. This is about, and this is Hennepin County. So there are some races which will show up in like Hennepin County and stuff like that. But it is obviously, it's on this because it's in Minneapolis specifically. This is the 4th District Court 24, Matthew Frank versus Christopher Leckrone. And Judge Matthew Frank was appointed by Governor Walz in 2023. There are basically 2 really straightforward reasons to vote for Judge Frank and not his opponent. One of the foundational experience lawyers should have if they want to become a judge is to spend time in court. You can become a prosecutor, defense attorney, or a litigator, but you really need to be going to court. According to his resume, Christopher Leckrone has worked for many years primarily in compliance, a job done entirely outside of courtrooms. He does list pro bono work with foster kids that might involve going into the courtroom, but that's very clearly not what he's spending most of his time doing. Matthew Frank was one of the lead prosecutors in the state's case against Derek Chauvin. And the 19 judges in Hennepin County up for election this year, the guys Leckrone decided to run against. Leckrone has completely hidden or sanitized social media presence, and I found no indication of his political views except that he opted to run against this particular judge. I can't tell you. I mean, I now know, okay, Matthew Frank, he's getting my vote. It's stuff like that. There are just, sometimes you flip that ballot over, there's 20 of them, and you're, okay, fine. But you don't know anything about them, but you should, because these races do matter, and it does matter who's going to be holding that job as a judge.
Judgeships are really hard. They're really hard to research partly because a certain amount of what happens in a courtroom is genuinely supposed to be private, and some of it, I would, a lot of what judges do is it's genuinely a job. It's not a political job. It's just a job. They're there to make sure that lawsuits happen fairly, that criminal cases are heard fairly. They're genuinely they're genuinely not doing a Republican job or a Democratic job if they're doing it right a lot of the time. I feel like on the Supreme Court, it really matters that that we have a Supreme Court in Minnesota, the state Supreme Court. Everyone was appointed by a Democrat at this point, and I think that matters a lot. I'm obviously, as a Democrat, I am highly in favor of that. But in an actual courtroom, in a county courtroom in Hennepin County or Ramsey County, these are people that are they're hearing cases where there are, a lot of the time there are not particularly political questions. Mm-hmm. And people bring in their own beliefs about the world and their own values, and that matters. But I was on a jury one time, and it was a really mundane criminal case. There was a guy who was sharing a household with a couple. It was officially a domestic violence case, but the people he'd assaulted were not romantic partners; they were roommates. Got mad because he thought somebody had drunk all his alcohol, and there was, he hit his roommates, and the judge, I have no idea what his political views were, because it really, in the context of the case that we were hearing, it just wasn't relevant. What mattered was that he was a good listener, that he was respectful of everyone in the room, from the jurors to the defendant, that he was compassionate, that he was like, but that also he was like respectful of everyone's time. So like, if the defendant took the stand, wanted to like kind of ramble, and he kept telling the defense lawyer, you need to like rein in your client, like you were wasting the juror's time by letting him ramble. It was thought-provoking and educational, and gave me a really like specific view of what I thought I want in a judge. And it's hard to know like what you're going to get looking at the judges, but like I do at the judge candidates. But I do feel like, if you're coming to run for judge and you don't have certain experiences, you're probably not qualified. You're probably not as qualified as the person you're running against. So.
Well, and by the way, a great point, and the judges matter, and I think that we are getting into this area now where it used to be about, okay, how will they treat a defendant or a prosecutor, and now it's what's their political belief. And I think we need to know these things before we just elect people in. And school board is another case of this. You cover the school board races. It used to be a school board race as, well, I'm not for putting new air conditioning units on this elementary school. That was the cutting edge decisions you had to make. Nowadays, it's, I want to ban every book in the library. And you're like, okay, it's, as you look at some of these races, it's just since you've been doing it, has it caught your mind how much some of these candidates are so inexperienced and actually have no background whatsoever as they try to run for an office that they don't seem to be qualified for in any capacity?
That's always been true. There have always been flake candidates who ran for office who like had no real idea what the job was going to involve. I am really aware of it because I research all the candidates, but like it's not new. I mean, one of the first races in Minnesota that I was paying attention to was in 1994. I was a college student, and Sharon, oh God, what's her name? Sharon Anderson was the Republican candidate for state attorney general. She is not qualified for that position. I feel really confident in saying this. She's still running for offices, including sometimes AG. She's never won a primary since, but she's, yeah. So like, and that was 1994. It was a few years ago now. So no. I mean, there are totally people that run for offices where they don't have a qualification beyond, well, the law says you have to be 30, and I am 32, and I am a U.S. citizen. Therefore, I am qualified for that.
I should be in charge of the nuclear codes. Yes.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Like, yes, you're a natural born citizen and more than 35 years old. So yes, according to the U.S. Constitution, you are qualified to be U.S. president. But I really think we could do better.
Naomi Kritzer is joining us. The blog is, once again, We'll Tell Stories for Food. So go ahead.
Can we tell people the URL? Because it's my name. It's naomikritzer.com. I think they'll find it more easily there than if they Google the title of the blog.
Here's what I'll promise everyone. After this, on all the socials, on the Blue Sky, on the Facebook, on the Mastodon, on the Threads, and even on godforsaken Elon's world, I'll basically make sure it's all posted out there and put all the links out there as well. One last question about this before we get into your writing. Is there a race this year that you're like, oh my God, as the research you've done in this that has really put you back on your heels?
So I'm currently working on my post about the U.S. Senate race. Okay. So like the people running against Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah.
There are 4 people on the ballot, and like I think part of why this race is as goofy as it is that like I don't think anybody thinks Amy Klobuchar is particularly vulnerable as a candidate. Like she's won with 60% or more of the votes every time she's run. So the Republican candidate is this guy named Royce White.
Oh yeah.
Who is he's a real piece of work. Who, among other things, like my favorite sort of little detail about him is that when he ran for Congress in 2022 against Ilhan Omar, in the primary against Ilhan. I don't think he actually won the primary. But when he ran in 2022, he spent $1,800 of his campaign money in a strip club.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
like, that's
appetizers.
My favorite.
Those appetizers aren't cheap, man. But that's why everyone goes to a strip club is appetizers.
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely. They really needed, So he was endorsed by the Republicans,
Yes.
and then won the primary.
Yes.
Like they had a normal guy, like a normie Republican who was running, and like Royce White won. So that's the Republican candidate. And then there are two other people running, both women. I was just researching one of them. She's Joyce Lacey. She's running as a Independence Alliance candidate, which means she's a Jesse-crat. Jesse Ventura's party, what's left of it. And she, her big issue is guardianship abuse, which is actually like a legitimate thing to be concerned about. Although I don't think running for U.S. Senate is at all going to get her, going to make, help to move the needle, right? Mm-hmm. She's really mad that Amy Klobuchar didn't pass the laws that she once passed on a state level, which, I mean, again, like some people really don't understand the job they're running for and like who would do the thing they want to have done, right? That's kind of the issue. And then the fourth person on the ballot is a woman named Rebecca Whiting, who's a libertarian. And it's just been one of those races where like there's just a lot of rabbit holes to go down. Well, and
no one is talking about these other candidates that are there, but you are, and you're doing the due diligence. Yeah. We've actually got a running tabulation. Last time when she ran against Neuberger, I think they called that race at 32 seconds into as soon as the polls closed. We've got a running tabulation. I think 7 is the over-under now. They're going to just, as soon as the polls close at 8, it's 8 o'clock and 7 seconds. Amy Klobuchar wins Minnesota. We're pretty confident that there's an over-under we can live with on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The blog is We'll Tell Stories for Food, but let's get to the author, Naomi Kritzer, and talk about your books. Liberty's Daughter out here. You've been writing science fiction here. I do love talking to authors because I think writers are amazing. And the fact that you guys come up with new ideas and new thought processes and the way you have to think things through is just amazing. So I want to talk, first of all, what is your approach when you sit down and you've come up with an idea for a book? How is it that you approach trying to flush out the world that you're about to write about?
People sometimes divide authors into sort of two types. They call them plotters and pantsers. Mm-hmm. Pantsers, it's in the sense of writing by the seat of their pants. I tend to be a plotter. I like outlines. I'm not a strict outliner, but like I tend to think about sort of the arc of the story I want. And the very first time I ever wrote a book, I had a sense of the overall arc, and then the actual planning I did was almost in the style of a road trip where you know where you're spending each night. Mm-hmm. So like I knew what the big emotional turning point moments of the book were. And those were sort of one was 20% in, one was 40% in, 60% in, and 80% in, like more or less. Like I had a sense of where those sort of, big stopping points were. And then each section, I sort of outlined it, figured out what I was going to do in that section. And then I wrote like from point A to point B. So it was like, I drove from Minneapolis to Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And then like the next day obviously I did this over many months. And so like the next day you might drive from Kansas City to whatever city is like 8 hours down the road from there. I don't know. I don't actually go on a lot of road trips, but like that was sort of the approach I took to figuring out how I was gonna have a novel's worth of stuff happening. Mm-hmm. And that it would be paced. It worked pretty well for helping me pace it, because I'd written short stories at that point, but it was my first novel, and I was figuring out how you do novel pacing. The thing was that each section like ended with like characters in a particular spot, and when I was done, I realized that like I'd gotten a lot better at writing as I went through the novel. So I took that first section, tossed the whole thing, and rewrote it from scratch, knowing that if I got the characters at the end to the right positions, I could put the new version of the first section on and it would all work.
And I want to just for everyone out there that's listening, that's thinking about writing a book, you sometimes have to do that. You sometimes have to start from scratch. And I think that that's part of the problem I have with some writers is that they get so intimidated by that idea to start from scratch, to redo this again. But whether it's a minimalist or people that are, Clancy-esque, or they're writing in, extreme detail. I think that the best writers, and especially with science fiction, is people that, regardless of how much you flesh it out, you have a complete world that's represented. And I was looking at the Liberty's Daughter. This was once again your book that came out last year, and just reading this, an archipelago of constructed platforms and old cruise ships assembled by a libertarian separatist a generation ago. And I just was like, okay, now we're cooking with gas. All right. You've created something just in that realm that can feed so many different things of the story. But at the same time, I mean, I'm always amazed by writers that can come up with that. And then as you live in the current world, be able to explore this world that you're creating.
Yeah, I mean, I was inspired to write Liberty's Daughter after I found out that there were people actually trying to build seasteads.
Really?
And I started thinking, like, part of what was fun about that as a setting is that, like, you could do like something that was like a Mars colony, but you didn't have to set it far enough in the future that a Mars colony was plausible, because it could be just kind of hanging out in the Pacific Ocean. So yeah, my sister went to college with the guy who runs the Seasteading Institute. So that's how I heard about seasteading as a concept.
Oh,
ideas are everywhere.
Libertarian. We've heard there was some guy that wanted to do Libertarian Island one time and said it will be a hoot when they say who's making coffee. And I just said at that point it will be. I'll let that be a surprise. It's all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. And scene. And
yeah, that's a big part of that's a big element of the book, is actually thinking about the fact that, like, a lot of the people who find libertarianism appealing are like people like Peter Thiel, right? Like really, really wealthy people who do not make their own coffee. And like, I started thinking about like what would happen, like how they would get the underclass of people that would be willing to make the coffee and clean the toilets and mop the floors and care for the children and all this other stuff. Like there's like a real set of real limitations for like getting people to come do this stuff for you if you're running something like a seastead. So that's a big, like a huge amount of the book is sort of talking about the people. The main character, the protagonist, is the daughter of one of the really privileged guys that's sort of running everything. But she's a teenager. She starts like looking around and asking questions in the way that teenagers will. And a lot of the story is about her sort of slowly identifying less with her wealthy father and more with the underclass of the seastead, and what that means and how that ends up playing out. Because the solutions that the very privileged will come up with to avoid having to make their own coffee can be really pretty grim.
And once again, Naomi Kritzer is joining us. There is if a person wants to read a book a little bit about your writing here, you have put out there The Year Without Sunshine. It's published online, free to read. It's basically about mutual aid set in Minneapolis. Talk a little bit about what's that story about. So if people want to find out a little bit more about you, what can they expect with that little story you put out?
Okay, so The Year Without Sunshine was published on Clark's World. It won a Hugo Award this year, nice. And won a Nebula Award.
Congratulations!
The story did. Thank you.
Congratulations!
And that story is about. It's set in Minneapolis. It's set after a disaster that is not specified, and it is about a block of people in South Minneapolis that come together to survive, to support each other, and to keep alive a woman on their block who has a chronic condition that means she needs oxygen. And so she has a oxygen compressor that only runs when there's power, and there's these constant rolling power outages. Like there's power some of the time, but not all of the time. So it's about these people on this block in Minneapolis coming together to provide mutual aid. And this story spoke to a lot of people this year. Like a lot of people really liked this story. You don't have to be from Minneapolis to like it, but Minneapolis people who read it generally really felt there are multiple people who think it's their block. So.
Yeah. The Year Without Sunshine. I'll get this link, and I'll put the link out for everyone out there. And congratulations on the accolades. And that's one of the things I like to do is great, and I love what We'll Tell Stories for Food and what you're doing there. You deserve every bit of credit. You're writing award-winning literature. That is magnificent, and especially as we have a modern war against writing at times, whether just someone doesn't like something they want to take them down. I'm becoming more and more respectful of not only teachers and librarians, but the writers themselves, who in the face of this culture don't shy away from writing things. And so you and I could talk for 2 or 3 hours. You and I could easily talk. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time today. If you are up for it, I'd love to have you back to talk about both issues again, your writing and the blog, if you have some time.
Happy to. Just let me know.
I will definitely talk. We'll have you on for the blog before the election for sure, and we'll get some updates on things. Naomi Kritzer, once again, We'll Tell Stories for Food. I will put out the link for that as well as also link to your books that are available out there, and the link to the short story. Naomi, I can't tell you how grateful I am you took the time. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. We'll take a break. Come on back. We're way late. Oh, gosh. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Thursday.
In constant sorrow.